The president said to be frustrated with the war in Afghanistan, and the debate over what to do next is dividing the administration. Top Trump strategist Steve Bannon and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster turning to Blackwater founder Erik Prince for advice. And Prince is going to join me in just a moment. But first, Barbara Starr is out front.
A military plan for Afghanistan has been delayed for months amid sharp disagreements in the White House between the president's top advisors.
We've had now 3 sessions within the National Security Council exploring a full range of options. And when I say a full range of options, I mean the entire landscape.
The president's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, is reportedly seeking the advice of Erik Prince, the controversial former head of the now disbanded contractor firm Blackwater. Prince's plan? Use military contractors instead of U.S. troops for a variety of unspecified missions in Afghanistan. While leading Blackwater, Prince's mercenary force was criticized for how it dealt with civilians in Iraq. Several former employees were convicted in a 2007 incident in Baghdad in which 17 Iraqi civilians were shot and killed. One of those contractors' convictions was overturned just last week. The Trump administration defending Prince and his proposal.
If you look at Erik Prince's track record, it's not about bilking the government. It's about the opposite. It's about saving the U.S. taxpayer money. So this is a cost-cutting venture. We open the door here at the White House to outside ideas.
Still, defense officials have long noted that in some operations, contractors are not less expensive than active-duty military members who are paid considerably less. The man leading the fight in Afghanistan, General John Nicholson, is arguing for a few thousand more troops to train Afghan forces mainly, in addition to the 8,400 U.S. troops already there. A plan believed to be backed by Secretary of Defense James Mattis and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster.
We have a shortfall of a few thousand, and this is in the NATO Train Advise Assist mission, so this can come from the U.S. and its allies.
Still, Nicholson may not have the full backing of the president, who is thought to be frustrated with Nicholson's command of the Afghanistan war, something that McMaster denied in an interview with MSNBC.
I've known him for many years. I can't imagine a more capable commander on any mission.
Does Secretary Mattis, does the president?
Absolutely.
A major unanswered question: would Afghan President Ashraf Ghani even accept Erik Prince's contractors? Aaron?
All right, a big question, and thank you very much, Barbara. Out front now, former Navy SEAL Erik Prince, who is the former CEO of the private military security company Blackwater, now runs a company called Profiteer Services Group. And Erik, thanks. Good to see you again. You point out that the United States has had 17 commanders in Afghanistan in 15 years. When you see that number in black and white, it's stunning.
Absolutely. There's been no unity of command, and that's just military commanders, not even counting the amount of ambassadors and chiefs of station from the CIA that we've gone through. Who has really been in charge in Afghanistan? Nobody. It's been extremely fragmented. We've had up to 140,000 troops in country, and we're now spending, the Pentagon consumes more than the entire defense budget of the UK just in Afghanistan, and we're losing.
So you are proposing a solution, and this solution, you've written about it in the Wall Street Journal op-ed, a private military force. So I know you don't like the word mercenary. Explain to me why it's not the right word.
Because actually it wouldn't. What I'm recommending is a rationalization. They still have 9,000 U.S. troops, another 4,000 NATO. They're rotate every 6 to 9 months. So when those troopers leave, all the experience and local knowledge that they had leaves with them. There's another 26,000 contractors in country. This plan takes it from that overspend down to a much smaller number. The Afghan forces need support at the battalion levels. Battalion is the basic unit of combat there. That's where the rubber meets the road. And the Afghans are continuing to lose dozens and dozens, thousands per month. Embedding mentors at the battalion level, attaching to the Afghan army, does not even meet the threshold of the UN definition of mercenary. So they're not mercenaries. They would be attached as long-term trainer advisors. Imagine them as a skeleton.
Are they military employees of the United States, or are they people that they're contractors?
They would be military employees of the Afghan government. Imagine them as a skeletal structure that provides leadership, intelligence, medical, communications and logistics support to all those Afghan battalions so it works reliably. Second, they need air power. Less than 40% of the U.S. provided air power to the Afghan forces still even functions because the maintenance and training has been such a failure. So they need governance support, they need mentor support, and they need air power, all attaching to the Afghan government, which doesn't meet, you guys like to throw the mercenary word around. They're not mercenaries.
But
They're
then what are
attached
they? If they're being paid by the Afghan government or U.S. taxpayers, but they don't work for the Pentagon?
under the UN law, no, they don't need to. If we want to Afghanize this is the longest war in American history.
Are they Americans?
They could be Americans, they could be foreign nationals, they could be NATO allies, they can be from the global South community of professionals, most of whom have served in that country already, that have a lot of experience, that want to go back. I mean, I've been in contact with, remember, in the months after 9/11, 100 CIA officers and a couple hundred special forces guys backed by air power crushed the Taliban. The more we've gone to a conventional war with a conventional army, we have gone backwards every year since then. They've surged up to 140,000 troops, and as soon as they pull back, it fails again. The reason I talked about in that op-ed, you have to put someone in charge. There has to be a lead federal official, or in this case, almost a bankruptcy trustee, that rationalizes the U.S. presence, that is in charge of all policy. Second, they have to stay there for a while, so you have that continuity of decision-making.
Okay, so the word you used for that person was Viceroy, was an American Viceroy.
And I mean Viceroy, that's a colonial term. The last thing
It is a colonial term.
Sure. But the colonial term came from, in the British Empire, they had very little communications, and you had to put someone in charge that can make the decisions absent a ship going back and forth. But in this case, it really means someone that can rationalize the basic mess that is U.S. policy been. Whether it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan, we've gone backwards.
When we use the word, though, obviously you point out it is a colonial word, right? The definition is a ruler exercising authority in a colony on behalf of a sovereign. In that case, Trump would perhaps be the sovereign, Afghanistan an American colony. I mean, it's
Again,
a loaded word. I mean, the Afghans,
I say that.
Are they talking to you about this? Are they open to it?
I've talked to plenty of Afghans about this. When they understand that we're not there to colonize, but merely that viceroy, that lead federal official term, is someone that will rationalize, so we don't go through a commander every year like we have been, or a different ambassador every 2 years, so there's been a complete fragmentation of unity of command. That has to change.
So I know that you said you wrote an op-ed. Reince Priebus, H.R. McMaster, Steve Bannon, then reached out to you.
Correct?
And they wanted to hear more?
They wanted to hear more, and then weeks later they said, okay, figure out what that actually costs. Give us a comparison. And so rationalizing and going down to a true battalion level mentor program that supports the entire Afghan army. Remember, the Afghan Special Forces works. There's about 17,000 of them because they've been mentored by U.S. Special Forces in exactly the way I'm recommending. They used to do village stability operations. That works really well. Again, it was shut down by conventional army generals. So mentoring the rest of the Afghan army in that same proven model works. Second, giving them some air, give them some governance support, so when the battalions order resupply, they get their food, their fuel, their ammunition, their parts on time. That's what you need to keep the Afghan forces afloat. All the rest, that goes from a $45 billion spend this year. Next year, the Pentagon needs over $50 billion, more than the entire UK defense budget. All that takes you down to less than 10.
Less than 10 is what you say.
$40 billion back to the Pentagon.
So
there's a lot of people that say, just pull out of Afghanistan. I disagree with that because I think the Taliban or ISIS would raise their battle flag over the U.S. Embassy in 6 months or a year. That's bad, but continuing the same, I would say, insanity that we've been doing for the last 16 years has to change. And I think the president is uncomfortable with that level, with that continuing on a bad
have you
course.
spoken to him
I have
directly
not
about this?
Nope.
So when you talk about H.R. McMaster, National Security Advisor, and Steve Bannon, are you still talking to them about these ideas?
I would say General McMaster does not like this idea because he is a 3-star conventional Army general, and he is wedded to that idea that the U.S. Army is going to solve this. But I think for the president, he's got to say, after 16 years, when do we try something different? And in this, here's the thing: the U.S. isn't doing anything below a corps level, right? That's the highest unit of movement of the Afghan Army. They're not doing anything at the ground level of the Afghan Army. So this can operate there, operate effectively, and create the off-ramp for the rest of U.S. forces to leave. Let's be done. We're still losing Americans. There was 2 American kids killed last week in the first 30 days of their deployment. Enough.
So Steve Bannon is more receptive to this?
I think Steve Bannon and other folks, even in NSC, and even quite a few in Congress.
And quite a few in Congress. And General Nicholson himself, have you spoken to him?
No.
No. And this Viceroy, this person would be American?
Again, Viceroy was a term only to describe the U.S. official, not a colonial official.
But it would be an American.
Absolutely, yes.
It would be an American.
A government, a U.S. government employee, call him a special envoy, but they have to control DOD policy and spending and rules of engagement and State Department authorities and CIA authorities. You have to combine so you don't have the interagency process doing nothing with a big committee groupthink that accomplishes nothing. 16 years is a long time to be doing anything, and we're failing.
But just to be clear, are you talking an American here that would be at the top administering all of this?
In there. They would be in
there.
Kabul.
Right,
Absolutely.
in Kabul. But
no more
it would be
9.5 time zones away.
The less than $10 billion would be paid for by American taxpayers, but the people that they are paying could be any nationality at all, right? Just to be clear, I understand.
$3.5 billion already the Pentagon has slated to support the Afghan forces. That pays for their payroll, their vehicle parts, their fuel, all that. That continues. There would be a continued role for U.S. Special Operations Forces, the 2,000 or so that are there.
Yes.
They continue on. This program can spool up underneath what the DOD is doing, but this kind of program can stay long-term. It costs a fraction of what we're spending now, and the Pentagon can spend that money on reset.
Yeah.
But let's figure out how to cauterize this endless bleeding that we have in Afghanistan.
You know, obviously, you have connections to Trump's inner circle. You're talking about, that you were reached out to by Steve Bannon, among others. Your sister is...
I did that. Actually, I wrote that op-ed because between my wife and I, we have a lot of kids, some of whom will serve in the military soon. The idea of them going to Afghanistan and getting killed like those kids did last year, I couldn't tolerate. So I wrote that op-ed with one audience in mind. The president read it, and that's what triggered this discussion.
They said the president read it and
He read,
asked them
I'm
to
told
call.
he read it at his desk, circled it, and said, learn more about this.
So he knows who you are, and obviously, as I said, it's not just that you know Steve Bannon and others. Your sister is Betsy DeVos, who, of course, is Education Secretary.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about another thing that you're central to here. A lot has been made of a meeting that you had with a Russian who is close to Vladimir Putin on the remote island of the Seychelles during the Trump transition, right? This meeting that everyone knows happened now. Who from the Trump team asked you to take the meeting?
No one. Zero. I was there on business. Okay? I was there meeting with Emirati officials. And there's lots of other people there. I met a guy. And clearly the U.S. intelligence community felt necessary to unmask me and leak it to the media. But if the media and the obsession on the Trump-Russia collusion, they've kind of jumped the shark if they're thinking that I had something to do with that. Because this meeting occurred in January, long after the election. So there's either all this grand Trump collusion plan before the election or not. Because if they asked me to go meet with some Russian, which no one actually did, happened to be there and I met a Russian.
Who'd you meet?
Pretty thin. Some fund manager. I can't even remember his name.
A fund manager, but you don't remember his name?
I don't remember his name. We didn't exchange cards.
How long was it? The meeting, do you remember?
It probably lasted about as long as one beer.
So it was a casual setting?
Absolutely.
Sort of over beers. Okay. Let me just say why this meeting is getting so much attention, because I know you're minimizing it.
But it's really not.
Well, it has been reported on extensively. Let me just lay out the timeline here, Eric, so everyone can understand, because you know this, but not everybody else does. Before this meeting happened between you and somebody who is a Putin confidant, and I know that from talking to people who know a lot about this meeting. So this person isn't just a random Russian. In December, the Washington Post reports you met with Trump transition officials at Trump Tower, right? Because you know people there, that makes complete sense. That same month, I'm also aware there was a meeting at Trump Tower between Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon, Michael Flynn, and the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. In December, the Washington Post reports then that you had a private meeting with the Emirati Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed. Then the meeting comes with the Russian in the Seychelles in January. I know the Emiratis delivered the Russian to the meeting. That's why the question is so important. Whether you were working on behalf of the Trump team, or even if they didn't ask you, was anyone on the Trump team aware that you were at this meeting?
No one was aware from the Trump team that I was even there.
No one was aware.
It was private business. It had nothing to do with the U.S. government. It had nothing to do with the Trump team or the transition team or anything else.
And what was the meeting about then?
Future business. It's that the Russian was someone that the Emiratis had done business with and said it's maybe someone useful for you to know.
And that was pretty much the extent of it.
That's it.
And in terms of, and you're saying it was all, when people talk about whether there was a possible back channel or anybody, all of that, you're saying no, off the table.
Complete hogwash.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your answering our questions about it. Thank you,
I am
Erik Prince.
amazed at the continued obsession with this, but when you have people dying in Afghanistan, Americans dying, let's figure out a way to cauterize the losses.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you. And next,